But hello, everyone. My name is Haley, and I am the technical manager for this session. And thank you for being a part of ANH 2025. We look forward to a robust and interactive session today. So I will share it over to Anna and her team, and thanks so much for joining, and you can take it over.
Okay, then I will take it over. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to this learning lab. Very exciting to see you all here. And today you're going to learn all about the Diet Quality Questionnaire. And in short, we call it the DQQ. You will hear the word DQQ a lot today. So after this learning lab, you know a lot more about the DQQ, what it is, how you can use it. You understand the strengths and the limitation of the tool as well. And we also talk a little bit on the Sentinel foods of the World Food Plan. So a very exciting day. But first, let me start with introducing who your facilitators are. So my name is Elise Talsma, and I'm an associate professor at Wageningen University in the Netherlands, and I work a lot with the Diet Quality Questionnaire. Over to Anna.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Herforth, and I am affiliated with Wageningen University as well, and the team here, and have led the Global Diet Quality Project over the last many years. And I will pass it to Christina.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Christina Sokorenko. I'm from Cornell University, and I have been working with the Global Diet Quality Project since about 2020. Great to meet you all. And I'll now pass it to Chris Foliano.
Hey everyone, welcome. My name is Chris Foliano. I'm a postdoc scientist with Wageningen University. Been working with the Diet Quality Questionnaire since about 2018, so it's been really exciting. Thanks for coming.
So I wanted to start out by giving a brief introduction that I hope will answer many of those questions, and then we can discuss further what has not been addressed. To start off, I want to bring us back to a common framework that's been used for decades in nutrition, in global nutrition, the UNICEF framework on the causes of malnutrition. And I want to bring this up to point out that dietary intake has been a piece of information which has been missing. In the nutrition community, we're very used to it being missing in our ability to do evaluations, to do monitoring, to do global monitoring, and yet it's so important. It is the direct cause of malnutrition, insufficient dietary intake. Also, poor dietary intake is a direct cause of other kinds of malnutrition other than undernutrition. And, we measure various other pieces of this framework. So on the underlying causes, for a long time, we've measured food access, infant and young child feeding practices, water and sanitation, health services. And just to point out that diet has not been captured in what we measure in terms of food security or food access. It's a different thing. It's what people eat. So this is really essential information in efforts to tackle malnutrition in all its forms. And really big news this year is that it has now become incorporated into the Sustainable Development Goals as a new indicator just approved by the UN Statistical Commission in March. The new indicator is minimum dietary diversity. It's a proxy indicator for micronutrient adequacy of diets, and it's applied for two specific populations where this indicator has been extensively validated for women age 15 to 49 and young children age 6 to 23 months. And I know many of you here are quite familiar with this indicator, but anyone who is new to it, it's a proxy indicator for micronutrient adequacy. And the indicator is at least 5 out of 10 food groups. This is for women, and the food groups are listed here. And a woman who has consumed at least 5 out of 10 of those food groups is more likely to have consumed a diet that's adequate in micronutrients. And the same principle goes for infants and young children. So really a game changer here in having diet be incorporated into a global framework. This is 2025, and it is the first time that a diet indicator has been in a global monitoring framework. That is a remarkable statement. We have known how important diet is forever in nutrition. And yet, this is the first year it's finally been elevated to the level of a global indicator, not only in the SDGs, but it turns out also in the World Health Organization's results framework. It's also the first year that they've been able to include a diet indicator related to non-communicable diseases in their internal results framework. So the feasible data collection for this is what has made the difference. I mean, having the indicators also is obviously essential. Minimum dietary diversity was validated in an extensive effort by lots of people that was really kind of mainstreamed about a decade ago. And it's taken another decade to get to a place where we could have feasible data collection. And that those two things, an indicator across contexts and the ability to collect data at low cost integrated within systems, are the two things that enabled this to be a global indicator. And the method of data collection has overcome past diet data collection challenges. It was designed specifically to do that. In the past, we heard things like this, and this is the recent past. This was actually last year where I heard this comment from someone who's involved in the CAADP, the Comprehensive African Agricultural Development Program, which has its results framework. They have already included MDDW in their results framework, but it's not gone well. I heard someone saying diet quality is very important, but it may not be feasible to collect the data. MDDW is a worst performing indicator in the existing CAADP results framework. Countries have not been able to collect the data. This is the problem that the diet quality questionnaire has been designed to overcome. So this is a new statement that came from a team from Nigeria, also friends of ANH Academy, members of ANH Academy. This team, the paper was led by Olutayo Adeyemi, and they had used, they essentially documented their experience over the lifetime of a program where they were trying to measure MDDW. And this program, I forget exactly how many years it ran, but several years that they, and this was prior to the development of the DQQ in the beginning of the program. They just tried several ways that they documented of how to collect data for this indicator. And some of the ways that they tried to collect this data had been validated in research studies, but when it got to actually implementing it in the field under resource constrained conditions, with not a lot of time to train enumerators, et cetera, some of the methods fell apart in conditions of reality. So what they concluded is that the DQQ, which they implemented after it was developed, that it ended up being the easiest and most cost-effective way to gather reliable data. Some of the methods they tried before, they actually had to throw out the data, but they found this was it required the lowest training, lowest cost to get usable data. So what is the DQQ? It is a survey module. It's a questionnaire, the diet quality questionnaire. It's not an indicator. It's a questionnaire. It is used to rapidly assess diet quality at population level. It is pictured here. You see the whole thing. You'll be using this today and becoming familiar. It's yes or no questions about foods consumed in the previous day. The questions are organized by 29 universal food groups, and the questions themselves are country adapted. And the questions are read aloud the same way each time, either in person or by phone, and it takes about 5 minutes to administer. So you can see an example. You will also have more examples today in your group work, but to just show you how the same questions, the questions correspond to the same food groups, but the questions themselves are worded differently according to the country and culture. So question 1 here is about foods made from grains, which is one of the MDDW food groups. And in Ghana, this question would be said, yesterday, did you eat any of the following foods? Bread, rice, wake, jollof, fried rice, omutuo, or rice porridge. Whereas in Kenya, that same food group, that same first question would be maize ugali, maize porridge, rice, bread, chapati, injera, pasta, or noodles. So you can see that the food items have been adapted to each country to represent the same food group. And this was a real collaborative global effort. Many, many people contributed to the success of getting this diet quality into the SDGs. And one piece that was very important was the adaptations of these questions. And over 1,000 key informants adapted the questions, spoke to our team, including Chris and Christina, over the last several years, and as well Betul and Cecilia and Andrea, who are not joining us today. And this made the whole thing work. We couldn't have done it without the insights of the key informants from around the world to adapt the questions. We also have done quite a lot of research over the last decade of validating the approach. It's the only list-based method for food group data collection that's been tested and developed for cognitive validity. Cognitive validity meaning, does the person who's hearing the question understand the question in the same way that I intend? And we did cognitive interviews in many settings to figure out what people were hearing. And we revised the questions based on that feedback. There are several cognitive testing papers from at least 3 different groups. I led one of them. Sorrel Namaste at DHS led another one, and there are a few papers. So if you go to dietquality.org and click on reports and publications, you can find all of those studies. This is a screenshot of some of the ones right at the top, but there's a whole list at the bottom of the page if you want to read further about the studies. It also contains the adaptation methods from input of all of those key informants around the world. I also wanted to say that there's also adapted questionnaires for infants and young children. These are aligned with the adult questionnaires, but they also included additional questions for all of the other infant and young child feeding practice indicators published by WHO and UNICEF, such as around breastfeeding and breast milk substitutes. So we have these 2 questionnaire adaptations for each country, one for infants and young child feeding to determine the indicators published by WHO and UNICEF. These have been used in DHS, in the demographic and health surveys for the last 5 years. And then we also have the general DQQ for the adult population, which has been implemented in people age 15 and older in both the demographic and health surveys and Gallup, World Poll, and other surveys as well. So from the country adapted DQQ, you get MDDW, you get other indicators of interest to countries, such as all 5, which is an indicator of have all 5 food groups recommended within dietary guidelines been consumed. This can be modified according to a country's own dietary guidelines and what food groups they recommend. And then we have the new indicators complementary to MDDW around protection against non-communicable disease and unhealthy food consumption. And just to show you what those indicators are, we'll also practice with them today. These allow tracking of dietary trends related to public health risk from diet-related NCDs, non-communicable diseases. They're validated against WHO recommendations, such as those around sugars, sodium, saturated fat, processed meats, carbohydrates, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. So to recap, I'll start with what the DQQ is not. It's not an indicator, rather, it's a standardized questionnaire. It is an acronym, but it's not a competitor to MDDW. It is actually a method, the most widely used method to collect MDDW data. It's also not a starting point. It's not to say, start here and go adapt. It's actually just ready to use as is. You all have adapted it already altogether. It's not a standalone, it's not meant to be a standalone survey. It's meant to be a survey module within a larger multi-topic survey. It only takes 5 minutes. So it's meant to go into large surveys. And, it's not a private product. It's not a research project. It's actually a global public good that's freely available for all to use. It's for, use as it is, and it has been developed that way to be used without modification because it applies consistent global rules for adaptation according to FAO, WHO, and UNICEF guidelines, but then the questions are country adapted. I mentioned that it's been implemented in all of the major global surveys, including Gallup World Poll, DHS, LSMS, and the MIX survey by UNICEF also recommends using the IYCF version. These are the countries where data has been collected in the Gallup World Poll. It is the first survey of what people eat in the general population, and this is what enabled that data to be available for the SDG indicator. And it's worth noting that for the majority of these countries, actually, this is the first ever nationally representative diet survey. Some countries have different types of diet surveys, but many of them never have had a nationally representative survey before. So we will extensively work with this link, dietquality.org, where you can find all of the questionnaires and the data, and as well the analytical calculator that automates the calculation of MDD and other diet indicators. And essentially, this is to fill the diet data gap we've had for so long to improve nutrition by having the ability to see what's going on with diets. And that it's not only the next steps, I think, really are going to come down to country level implementation and using this tool in different kinds of research where we could not include diet before because it was too complicated. Now, if we're doing a study, research study on something like an agriculture program or a social protection program, we can include the diet module as a part of looking at the impacts of those programs on diet as well as their other main outcomes. So the DQQ is there to enable that comparability with how data has been collected elsewhere and the utility of the indicators in a feasible way. I want to acknowledge our many donors who have made all of this possible, being incredibly supportive, and then non-financial supporters also listed for this work that's been led through the collaboration of Gallup, Harvard, GAIN, and a lot of inputs from Wageningen as well. So I think I stop there. If we have some quick questions or clarifications, we can do those now if they're burning questions. We also will have plenty of time during the group work for clarifications as well. I see the question in the chat from Eureka. Has any country adapted the questionnaire to include questions on whether children have received supplements, home fortification, biofortified foods, etc.? Great question. No, those are important topics. They are not part of the diet quality questionnaire. So anyone can measure those things, and they are important for many purposes. But again, I would emphasize how this is one module that's designed to go together with other types of information that are gathered. So for generating indicators like the ones I went over, including MDD, we don't need those other pieces of information around supplementation, et cetera. Those may be very important for any given survey, but they would be a different module. Thank you also for the question from Nilofer on DQQ for specific age groups. So this is a really good question, and I wish Betul were here because Betul did quite a lot of validation work in her PhD dissertation looking at this for potential for children. That comes up a lot. And what I would say to summarize briefly is that it seems from the literature that around age 10 or 11, people start being able to recall their food intake from yesterday in a sort of consistent way. Whereas before, younger than that age, dietary recall is quite tricky because of just the way children's brains work. And so essentially, this questionnaire has been used extensively in age 15 and older. And that's because of just how the surveys are designed. They start at age 15, but probably it can be used from age 10 or 11 and older. And below that, I would use caution, extreme caution, for trying to do 24-hour recalls with children in general. Seasonal variation. Afsana asks a question about seasonal variation of food availability. So that's another great aspect. So the questions themselves are designed to include foods from various seasons because we don't know which season the questionnaire is going to be used. So it includes foods from, seasonal foods that at the time you're using the questionnaire, everybody might say no or not have consumed these foods. The classic one is mango season. The question on vitamin A rich fruits obviously includes mangoes, even though outside of mango season, a lot of people might just not have consumed mangoes, but the item is still there. So the questions are designed to include seasonal foods that may or may not be available at the time of the survey. And that's partly so that it could be used to track seasonal trends in these indicators. And the international surveys are not great at doing that because it's hard to, a lot of surveys just happen at one time of year. That's certainly true for Gallup World Poll, and it's something that would be nice to have more seasonal information on how diets shift across seasons. So maybe we can respond to some of the other questions within the chat and move on to the next activity, which is, I believe, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. So we are going to have the opportunity to actually work on administering the DQQ in small breakout groups. But before we do that, we want to do a quick exercise together in the plenary session. And we are going to be using Peter Menzel's book called What I Eat. It's an incredible book if you haven't had a chance to check it out. There's also a website. And he actually went around the world and he shot photos of typical diets from various individuals in different countries around the world just to compare and contrast what a typical diet for that individual looks like. I do want to note that these photos do not represent everyone in the country. It's just an individual and their typical diet. And I'll briefly go over the breakout group exercise, but Christina will go into more detail. But essentially what we're going to do is go into breakout groups, and you're going to be assigned one photo from Peter Menzel's photography. You're going to look at the photo together and discuss your impressions of that person's diet. Then you're going to delegate roles. One person is going to pretend to be the person in the photo. Another person will be the interviewer, reading the DQQ and assessing whether the person in the photo consumed the foods on the DQQ. And then the third person will be recording the foods on the indicator calculator, which we'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. So,
and I just wanted to say also that Peter Menzel and Faith Delicio are good friends of ANH Academy and were keynote speakers a few years ago. So some of you may have met them. And we love their book and how it allows us to look at different diets, individuals from around the world. It's called What I Eat. Someone asked for the reference.
Great. So we are going to start by looking together at this photo. And so together, if we could answer in the chat in real time, this is a woman in Namibia. And maybe together in the chat, if we can type what's going well in the diet, and maybe what's missing in this particular diet. Does anything come to mind when you zoom in to what they're eating on an average day?
Actually, I will just give a quick point out there that this is not necessarily an average day. This is just what the person ate yesterday. And that's also important for the DQQ, is that it's not actually asking about an average day. It's specifically asking about yesterday. Whatever weird day that was, that's what you're answering. And so this was this woman's diet yesterday.
Yeah, thanks, Anna, for that clarification. I see some notes in the chat. Yes, fruits and vegetables are missing. It's not diverse. Maybe animal source protein is missing. Yep, only starchy food. Exactly. Very good. Does this diet have any unhealthy food to limit, such as any sugary foods, ultra-processed foods, processed meats?
Don't see them.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, so mostly staple foods. Great. Yeah, thank you. No processed foods visible. Very good. So maybe if we can go to the next photo, Anna. And so this is also a gentleman from Namibia. He is a truck driver, and you can see that the diets are very contrasting, even though they're in the same country. And so what about this diet? What does it look like? Are there any healthy foods such as
No.
Where's the fresh food?
Sorry.
Somebody says. Yes.
Hmm.
Mostly junky food, super processed. Yep, exactly. You guys are good. Sugary sweetened beverages and snacks. Exactly. So you guys get the idea. This is a good example of what we'll be doing together. As mentioned, you'll be assigned a photo, the DQQ, and you'll be working through it together. But just as an example, I would love to actually ask the first question of the Namibia DQQ, and then Anna will show you how to actually enter it in the indicator calculator. And so looking at the woman's diet, did she have any of the following foods yesterday? Mealie pop, thick maize porridge, samp or samp miles, rice, bread, macaroni, or spaghetti? Yes or no? Yes. See lots of yeses. Very good. Excellent. And so Anna will show you how you will enter that into the DQQ calculator here.
So first, what you'll do in groups here, you'll go to the link there, and we'll give this to you again, but it's a link that says calculator, and this is what it looks like. And you scroll down and there's radio buttons. So for the first question Chris just read, and for that photo, I would click yes. She did eat, I'm not sure which one this was, but some sort of samp or mealie pop grain-based porridge.
Excellent. You guys are good. Thank you. I am going to pass it over to Christina, who will walk us through the individual breakout group session. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So next we'll move into our first breakout activity, where you'll have a chance to apply the diet quality questionnaire in a hands-on visual exercise. You'll be broken out into small groups. You'll analyze a photo depicting a diet from one country and walk through how we would assess it using the diet quality questionnaire. So I'll just flash some instructions here and walk through them briefly, and then everyone will get a link to the instructions at the end. So worry not if you don't catch a detail or two. Share my screen. Okay, so I'll just walk us through one country here, but each group has been assigned to a different country and photo, either from Mexico, Venezuela, or Iran. You'll get the link in your breakout room and you can open it from the shared document. So the first thing you'll do is you'll take a moment to look closely at the meal in the photo. What's there? What stands out? And before diving into the administration of the diet quality questionnaire, you'll start with some open conversation in your group. What's going well in this diet? What might be missing? Are there signs of diversity? Are there foods that could increase the risk of chronic disease? These initial impressions will help anchor how we later interpret the indicators. Next, you'll head to dietquality.org, like you just saw my colleague Anna Herforth do, and you'll click on Diet Quality Tools and download the diet quality for your country. Again, you'll be assigned to either Mexico, Venezuela, or Iran. You'll need this questionnaire to simulate a real data collection scenario, just like in a national survey. And next, you'll split roles in your group. Ideally, 3 people take the lead. One person becomes the person in the photo and will answer the questions based on what's pictured. So you're role playing as the individual in the photo. The next person is the interviewer. So you'll read the diet quality questionnaire out loud and remember to say the question number. I also want to flag that for questions 6, 7, and 10, you may see multiple questions such as 6.1, 6.2. If any of the foods are consumed in those questions, you'll answer yes in the radio buttons. And that takes me to the third person. One person is the recorder using the diet quality questionnaire calculator tool to log the answers. The rest of the group, if there's more than 3 people, can help describe what's in the photo and assist the role player. Once you've gone through the questionnaire, the calculator will show you a few key indicators on the right-hand side, showing you whether this person met minimum dietary diversity, whether they consumed protective foods, and whether they consumed too many unhealthy foods. As a group, you can discuss what these indicators tell you and what might be missed in a photo-based assessment as well. You'll have all of these links at your disposal in the breakout rooms, and you'll have about 25 minutes total for this. So pace yourselves, maybe a couple minutes for the initial discussion, 5 to 10 minutes for the diet quality questionnaire simulation, and a few minutes at the end to reflect together. We'll give you a time check midway through. And if you run into any issues, we'll be jumping from room to room in an effort to support. So we're about to open the breakout rooms. The slides with instructions and links will be in the chat, and you can also find them once you're in the room. Take your time. We're curious to hear what you notice, and we'll regroup shortly to share what everyone has found.
So thanks everyone for the great work on going through this exercise. From popping around to different rooms, I just want to say that I noticed there were a couple hiccups with the links. So one thing that happened is I think there was a bad hyperlink in the slides. So we apologize for that. I wanted to share how to troubleshoot that in real life. So if you don't have the link to the Venezuela questionnaire or the Iran questionnaire or any other country's questionnaire, I just wanted to make sure everyone knows that you don't need that link. All you need to remember and hopefully bookmark is dietquality.org. And you go to the home page and it has tools, data, and explore by country. So if you wanted to look for the Venezuela resources, you can just click Venezuela, and the DQQ is under download resources and is here. I think some people may have also had trouble with Google, the Google Drive, which is something that has no quick fix, but we're actually trying to move away from Google Drive over the long term. So hopefully that will get updated on the website over a number of months. But for now, anyway, that is how you navigate. You can also do it a different way. You can go to tools, you can search by country. So Venezuela, DQQ, download, and it takes you to the same page. So you can just familiarize yourself with the website, and you're able to, using the country adapted DQQs tab, tools, or explore by country, find your way to the DQQ itself. So that was the biggest issue that I noticed. One other thing just to note is, again, on the indicator calculator, that many of the indicators we'll be discussing now are here. So I hope that you still have those open and can refer to them. I know one group I worked with took a screenshot of the results. So now I'll turn it over to Elise to debrief.
Yeah, let's have a look at what you found. But first, I would like to know how you felt by filling it in. Was it easy? So just by identifying all the foods to the right food groups, and then thinking about this person. If you would ask this person in the picture these questions, would this person be able to answer these questions? You can just quickly say, uh, um, put your remarks or answers in the chat, so we can discuss a little bit about it. So was it easy? Maybe I can make it more easy for you. Was it an easy tool to fill in? Was it new for you? So somebody is saying yes, very easy. Okay, so it was easy to do.
Hi. I
Yes.
was supposed to raise my hand. It
Okay.
was an easy tool. It was just that identifying some of the foods from a photo was a bit challenging, especially if you weren't familiar with the culture.
Yes, yes, of course. And of course, if you would do research on this, you would familiarize yourself first with the culture, or it's even in your own country. So then these things are a lot easier. That's also what you have to think of. Yeah. It was easy to fill in, except for the mixed dishes. That's what I read also in the chat. But the respondent would be able to answer. That's correct, because hopefully they know what was in the mixed dish, of course. And yeah, okay. So in a way, from what I hear back from you, the general feeling is that it's really easy. Then the next step is, I hope you got there. The next
Can
step.
I ask a question? Just a quick question.
Yes.
In a
Come on
normal
in.
scenario, when you're using it for data collection, would you would be asking the person to recall? So there would be no picture in front of him, or would you be using a food atlas to show them for the country-specific items?
No. The way it is done is basically you sit in front of a person with the questionnaire and you read it out loud, and the person just say yes or no. So in that way, it is a very easy way of doing it. A very easy questionnaire.
Okay, so there would be
you
no
don't use
pictures.
pictures.
Okay.
No.
Okay, thank you.
It's recollection. So basically, it's about the past 24 hours. You say from the moment you wake up to that's the way a 24-hour multi-pass method is also done. That's how you start it. And then there are easy yes or no questions. So there are no quantities in there. It doesn't really matter how much you consumed of a product. Yeah? Okay, let's then talk a little bit about the indicators. So did you understand the indicators that were derived from it? I hope you got to that part, because that's always the fun part. So just say something in the chat if you want to, or open your mic if you want to share anything about the indicators.
I had an observation. We were given the questionnaire from Iran, and
Yes.
I couldn't understand that why we had the healthy diet pattern as no, because we had like zero unhealthy food consumption and the diet looked pretty healthy. So I couldn't understand why did we have no as a healthy diet pattern. And the second question was about the dietary diversity score was 5. So if you could talk about what does 5 mean?
Yeah. Okay, Anna, are you able to come in with these questions? Because on the healthy diet part, I think Anna knows more. You have to unmute, Anna.
All right. Yes, thanks for the question. And trying to see if I could share. I don't have it calculated here, unfortunately. But there we go. So I can do a recap of what these indicators are indicating. So the first one listed on this here, I'll just leave the scores out for a moment, is all 5, whether all of these 5 groups that are listed out in 1A through 1E are consumed. And if they're all 5 of them are consumed, then all 5 is yes. If any one of them is missing, then all 5 is no. The MDDW, as you heard, is a score of at least 5 out of 10 food groups. So someone asked about the dietary diversity score. If it says 5, then MDDW should say yes, because it's at least 5 out of 10. If the DDS said 4, then the MDDW should say no. Protective food consumption is one of the new indicators that's used to reflect the WHO recommendations around protective food consumption against chronic disease. And it includes 3 components: at least 1 vegetable, at least 1 fruit, and at least 1 whole grain, pulse, nut, or seed. So if all of those are present, then protective food consumption indicator would say yes. And if any one of these were missing, it would say no. So even though if you consumed fruit and whole grains, those are both protective foods, but for the indicator called protective food consumption, if vegetables was missing, it would still be a no, because it captures all 3 components. Then for unhealthy food consumption, it includes soft drinks, more than 1 sugary food or beverage, more than 1 salty, ultra-processed food, and processed meat. So if any of those are present, so if you had only 1 sugary food, then that's within, that usually falls within meeting the recommendations around sugar consumption, which the WHO recommendation is less than 10% of energy from sugar. So usually as a proxy indicator, these are all proxies for quantities. If only 1 sugary food is consumed, or like a tea with sugar or coffee with sugar, that fits within the sugar recommendations. But if it's more than 1, then it starts to exceed typically the sugar recommendations. So that's how these work. If any of these indicators for the unhealthy food consumption are a yes, then the total indicator would be also a yes, that some sort of, whether it was sugary or salty or processed meat, some sort of unhealthy food was consumed. And then the healthy diet pattern, I think, we just put this up online, and I think thanks for the question. It would be good to have a further explanation right there. What the indicator means is that both the protective food consumption and the lack of unhealthy food consumption were met. So it's it's all of the things together. So having consumed at least 1 vegetable, at least 1 fruit, at least 1 whole grain, pulse, nut, or seed, also not too much sugar, also not too much salty processed foods, and also not processed meat. So it's capturing all of those components of a pattern that would protect specifically against NCDs. So this is separate from MDDW. This is a complementary indicator. MDDW is about nutrient adequacy, and what's for short, just summarized healthy diet pattern, is about non-communicable disease. But indeed, I think some further explanation would help, which we can add to the website. So thanks for that question.
Good. I also see some other questions in the chat, but it's mainly more about what the MDD, the dietary diversity score is. And I don't think we are going into that at the moment. Yeah,
Maybe
I
you
see.
can say something briefly about that, because I see a couple of questions around quantities, which are equally valid questions for both the MDDW and the unhealthy food consumption. So these are all using food groups as proxies for quantitative consumption. As you saw when you implemented the questionnaire, there are no quantities. So how can food groups represent quantities of nutrients consumed? That question was answered by many years of validation studies showing that for these particular 10 food groups, if a person consumes at least 5 of them, the correlation of the quantities of nutrients they consumed with those food groups is higher than if they consumed less than 5. So a score of at least 5 means they've more likely consumed adequate nutrients. Similarly, for the sugary side, I see your hand up and feel free to elaborate, but in your question you asked, there's no quantity, how can we tell? What we see in the data doing validation of these indicators is exactly the same principle. The food group can proxy for quantity. What we see in the data is that if someone consumed a soft drink, they have almost certainly exceeded the recommendation on sugar. And it's possible that they had 20 milliliters of soft drink. But what we see in the data is usually that doesn't happen. As a proxy indicator, consuming soft drinks is a valid proxy for consuming too much sugar.
Mm-hmm. But I thought what you said was if there's 1 yes, then we wouldn't count it as an unhealthy pattern. But if there's more than one yes, we wouldn't. And speaking as someone who's seen people who drink like 8 Cokes a day, they would only say yes once and maybe not have any candy or anything else, but they're slugging Coke. It's still only one by that.
Yes, for the sugary food or beverage. Yes. So a nuance of this indicator is that soft drinks alone are already a proxy of too much sugar. And
even if they say, if that's the only thing they say yes to.
right.
Okay.
So that's why soft drinks are by themselves.
Got it. Got it. Thank you.
Soft drinks are such a strong indicator of too much sugar consumption. And then the other sugary foods, so it turns out that sweetened coffee or sweetened tea is not that strong of an indicator of sugar consumption, even though we know that in certain settings, people drink sweet tea all day long and it's a lot of sugar. But on average, it's quite variable. So for the more than one, it's everything except soft drinks. So baked sweets, other sweets like candies, sweet tea and fruit juice, and yeah, fruit drinks also. Thanks.
Okay, let's stop that discussion there, and then we go over to the next activity.
Okay, so if you have other questions, please also put them in the chat, and it's good for us to see them even if we can't get to all of them. Also, I just want to clarify, I see people talking about a picture tool, and I don't want anyone to leave with the wrong impression. That's just for our learning lab. That like there's no the pictures, no pictures are part of implementing the diet quality questionnaire. So this is just for the purpose of today, to see instead of report in past years, we've just had people report their own diet, which you could also do. But today we're using pictures to demonstrate how diets can be super variable in terms of, you know, we saw that the diet from Mexico, it, you know, doesn't have a lot of unhealthy foods, really any unhealthy foods in the unhealthy food consumption, but it also doesn't have a lot of protective foods. It really only has beans as the protective food, and it's quite limited. Whereas we see the diet from Iran has lots of diversity and also not that many unhealthy foods. And we see the diet from Venezuela that we saw has a lot of unhealthy foods and limited protective foods. So we just wanted to use the photos so that people can see differences in these different, you know, the variation of diets that may come up in a diet survey. And a few people are urgently asking about the GDR score. And that's a count. It would take probably too much time to go into the details. It's still there. It's a score, which means that it's essentially a count of the healthy food groups minus a count of the unhealthy food groups. However, scores are quite difficult to use to interpret in a lot of ways, like the dietary diversity score of on average in a population of, you know, 3.2 versus 3.5 versus 5 is a little harder to interpret than a prevalence. So we've sort of moved away from using the score sums of food groups consumed, which are captured in the GDR score, it means Global Dietary Recommendations score, into these prevalence indicators of, you know, how many people consumed diets that had more than one sugary food or beverage, instead of having it be a count of sugary foods or beverages. So I didn't want to go into that in too much detail because we're moving more into prevalences as an easier to interpret way of looking at diet indicators. So we'll try to do the second activity in about 10 minutes. And the purpose is just to use the data. So you've practiced with the questionnaire, and now we'd like you to practice a little bit with using the data that's available on dietquality.org from countries, from now 93 countries. And so you see all of the indicators here. We've discussed some of these that are listed. You can see how national surveys of these 93 countries have come in on these various different indicators. So for example, already you can see, to answer the question 1, which countries have the highest whole grain consumption, you can go to the food group whole grains and look at the data on which countries have reported the highest prevalence of people consuming whole grains and discuss. So that's a little cheat sheet for the first question, and then see what you get for the second and third question as well.
Well, great, everybody is back. I hope it was interesting to look at the indicators and what it meant on the map. And as a short wrap up, it would be good to talk about it. What do you think about looking at the indicators? Was it easy to answer the questions that were asked? So please feel free to share anything in the chat if you would like to, or just raise your hand and open your mic and share it with us. Great.
Yeah, at least I noticed something weird. Of course, the process was very easy and everything, but I noticed this part on soft drinks, that low-income countries had the higher consumption. I'm finding that a bit weird. I expected countries that are more developed economically to have higher consumption. I know countries like China, of course, because of the culture, maybe they have maintained more of healthier foods, but I didn't understand that. Maybe you can clarify for us.
Thanks for that. Well, when you can look at the map of soft drink reported consumption globally and see the patterns there, I just want to highlight that a lot of the high income countries are not covered. So that could be one aspect of your question, that we do see mainly low and middle income countries. The United States is covered. That was because one of our donors was the Rockefeller Foundation, and they do a lot of work in the United States, and they wanted to cover the United States. But many of the others are low and middle income. And just you can see where the patterns are of higher soft drink consumption. Middle East and the Americas are quite high, Southern Africa.
Yeah, so here it's clear that you can't compare it to the high income countries because we have no data. So it's also important that gets included. Okay, another question, Muhammad.
Yeah, thank you. So mine is not, it's just a contribution. It was really insightful, especially on the second question. India had quite a low cheese consumption, and India is known to be one of the highest countries with milk production. So it was a bit, having it in a map view really puts that to light. And so we're discussing the cultural differences. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, good. Anybody else who would like to, or something surprising, or something new, or something unexpected?
I'll just say,
Yeah.
one of the things we talked about was that it was striking that adjacent countries had different, I just put that in the chat, that countries you would think would be very similar.
Oh, yeah. And that was unexpected.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's good, so good with this data that you can compare that. Before that, we were never able to do so. So that's a nice remark, Bea. Thank you for that. Yeah.
I just want to add here that it has made this tool has made it very easy. So thank you so much for working on it. I was just wanting to bring you back on the soft drink consumption. How do we incorporate the diet version of soft drinks with the sugar? There are no added sugars. Do they add up to the sugar, to the soft drinks also? Like, do they add? So it could be any soft drinks, the diet version or the no sugar versions, but it will still be included as soft drinks?
Yeah, you mean so where it's labeled? Yeah, in which group it's put. Anna?
Thank you for that question. And there's actually a bunch of tricky things that are captured in that question. first, when we designed the adaptations of this question, we actually tried to separate non-sugar sweetened soft drinks, so like diet soft drinks. And it was really, really hard to do because of the terminology was not well understood. So the cognitive validity of trying to say regular soft drinks like sugar sweetened or diet or zero, like was really hard to do. And we also found from survey data that does exist in a number of countries that there's just, in many countries, the prevalence of diet is really low. It's more of an issue in high income countries, but in the countries that were surveyed here, it tends to be very low prevalence. And the third tricky thing is that the WHO has a guideline on the use of sugar substitutes, and basically is quite they're really not a good substitute. They're not a healthy food. So like diet sodas is also not considered a healthy, it would be considered an unhealthy item. So at the end, whether it's sugar sweetened or diet, they both count as unhealthy foods. And it's really hard to pull them apart. Just like it's very, very hard to pull apart 100% fruit juice from fruit flavored drinks. That turned out also to be impossible.
Thank you.
One more question from Lana.
Thanks so much. I love learning more about this tool. It's such an impressive piece of work. I have a question about the application of it in high income countries. So I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to is the scores and the tools. I know they've been validated in different countries, but do we expect that they mean the same thing in contexts where overconsumption is a much bigger deal than sort of underconsumption and malnutrition? So if you can just touch on that a little bit, because in a way I'm a bit intrigued that we haven't had the uptake in high income countries.
Over to Anna.
Go for that one. Let's look at the patterns of different indicators. So the indicators are designed to mean the same thing across contexts. And what we would hope and expect to see is, because they mean the same thing, we would see variation across contexts in the different aspects of diet quality. So there's no one single indicator of all diet. We have used different aspects of diet to show the differences between countries. So if we look at MDDW, this is about nutrient adequacy. And we see that in much of Asia and the Americas, it's quite high. In much of Africa and South Asia, it's quite low, the prevalence of women meeting MDDW. So there's a problem with nutrient adequacy in the diets in Africa and South Asia. Then if we look at unhealthy food consumption, we see the opposite. And it's not a one-to-one, like it's important to gather these. We can't assume that they're direct opposites, but we do see these trends being opposed where there is low prevalence of unhealthy food consumption in Africa and much of South Asia, although there's some, prevalence in South Asia growing, and also throughout the Americas and in Eastern Europe, we have very high prevalence of unhealthy food consumption. So the indicators mean the same thing, and we see differences across.
What about within high income countries, or within any countries? Do we see a lot of variation in these measures when we apply them at a country level in terms of yeah?
I was thinking exactly that when you were noting the differences along borders. And, again, if we look at soft drinks, I would imagine that, say, within Brazil, we would see big differences if we were looking at the major cities versus the rural areas. That's a hypothesis. I mean, we can't necessarily see, we actually can look at differences between urban and rural, but we can't look within countries. So we see rural soft drinks is quite a bit lower than urban, but it still shows up as a whole country. So if there were a country survey that could disaggregate among regions, then we could see those differences, and maybe the border lines wouldn't look so stark if we see, where in the country these indicators are higher versus lower, rather than looking at the national average.
Sorry, just a short question to follow up. So the data available is not disaggregated? It's only at the country level? Or just the indicators here are shown at the country level, but there is actually access to disaggregated data?
The data collected through the Gallup World Poll can be disaggregated, as we see here, by rural, urban, female, and male. But it cannot be disaggregated by region or state or province. That requires a survey with a higher sample size and more representation at lower administrative levels.
Thank you very much. But I saw in the beginning that there's also the LSMS in Nigeria. Is that the only one? Then the only like data source with more disaggregation for now?
There are a few. That's a good example. So B notes that you could do a survey with this tool allowing for disaggregation. Yes, absolutely. That's it. That the disaggregating potential is about the sampling and the survey design, not the tool. So indeed, in Nigeria and Ethiopia, they've used this tool at national level in the LSMS, which is a much larger sample and can be disaggregated by state or region or province in whichever country it's used. And some other countries have done other types of surveys that have a much larger sample.
Then, given the amount of time, a final question for Dexter.
Thank you again. I was just wondering that both UK and Australia seem to have less presentation on the map. Any reason? Because when you look at literature, there's enough from both countries.
Yeah, it's just it hasn't been prioritized there, isn't it, Anna? That's the, yeah. There needs to be money available to do these kind of surveys, so they haven't incorporated it. They probably have their own tools. Yeah.
Well, this was all, the data we see here is all collected in the Gallup World Poll, which does cover all countries. But the donors who supported this data collection had restrictions on their funding, which do not allow it to be used for high-income countries. And that's because high-income countries have enough money that they should be able to contribute for themselves in theory. So it's just a logistical, so far, funding reality.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, Anna, then I give the word back to you for some final words about this Learning Lab.
Oh, thank you so much. And I also one thing that we didn't touch on the report back was just the importance of monitoring, that these patterns change. And I wish that we had, I wish that we had been able to do this survey in 1980. And I think that if we had seen the difference between then and now, we would have seen the change over time in consumption. And one way that we can already see this is extremely clear is, I don't know if anyone of the groups got to the question in the soft drinks where we look at the top consumer of soft drinks when the survey was done was Palestinian territories. And there's no way that Palestinian territories are the top soft drink consumer now in 2025. That just tells you how situations change and diets change, and it's important to be monitoring indicators instead of looking once, every decade or once every 20 years or more. So just to sum up, a recap of the tools that we've looked at. The DQQ is available for each country via the pathways we saw on the homepage. Everything is accessible through dietquality.org. So you can just click around to find what you're looking for, whether it's the tools, the indicators we practiced in the second group activity, the calculator we practiced in the first group activity, or those reports and publications that several people at the beginning were curious about the validation studies. So those are all available on the website as well. And just to say, if you are using the DQQ in your own work, please check back for updates. Occasionally there's a correction. Sometimes when a country starts to implement the questionnaire, the translations get corrected, and those things do get incorporated onto corrections and updates on the website. So do check back for any of the, the current DQQ that may have been corrected by a user. And if you see errors, you can also send us an email at info@dietquality.org or use the contact us button. And hopefully this continues to get further sharpened as people use the tools more and more. So I really thank all of my co-presenters today for helping to design the session and present it and do the recaps, and all of you for your participation and great, great questions. And I think I'll hand it to the ANH Academy organizers for the last instructions.
Yeah, thanks, Anna, and thanks for your whole team, Christina, Chris, and Elise, for sharing kind of your expertise in this tool. I know I really appreciated it, and I know a lot of participants really enjoyed it as well. And thank you so much for joining, and thanks a lot.